So today I'm going to talk about boutique versus clones. And don't worry, there's going to be no moralistic whining. I'm going to talk about this in a technical and really, hopefully, enlightening way to help you understand and discover some really cool new things about why boutique stands out and what you're really buying into. Because I see a lot of people on forums and they come up and they go, I bought this pedal and I bought this one's a tenth of the price, blah, 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 they sound the same. Okay, let's answer that, which I'm really looking forward to. So first of all, what is the technical component difference? If you open these up and look inside a boutique pedal and a cheap pedal, what's the difference? Sometimes not as much as we'd like. I'll admit that sometimes it varies a little by manufacturers. Some of the premium brands are prone to using quite cheap parts. But let's ignore those bad actors. The main difference is that really cheap pedals use leftover parts, which is a clever little trick. So Samsung or Sony come in, they make a million whatever, or a million iPhones, and at the end of it, they've got boxes of leftovers and spares that they just want to chuck in the bin. Now, our Far Eastern friends don't like throwing things away like that, and they'll just scoop them up. So those are free parts, and a lot of your pedals are made using free leftover parts. So the resistors, capacitors in them, the quality is very variable from batch to batch, because it really just depends what they've got on hand. As a manufacturer, if you're a really tiny manufacturer as well, and you go and get China to manufacture something, you would say, put 10k resistors in. And they'll just say, okay, let's see what's in the big box of leftovers. And they'll go, oh, look, here's half a reel with 780 10k resistors on it. We'll use them. So you get variable quality. And that's one of the ways of keeping the price down, because those parts have already been bought. They've already been paid for by Samsung, Sony, Apple, whoever. So they can charge you any amount. They can charge you 0.00001 pence, and they're still making profit. That's kind of clever. So that's a difference. Boutique pedals, however, done right, we will specify the brand, we will specify a lot of things about them, and we will have a specific thing in mind that we will put in. That doesn't always hold 100% true, but generally speaking, more consistent and predictable. Next one is the part quality themselves. Again, often doesn't make a huge difference. If you were to take two capacitors and compare them side by side, like just by measuring them with a multimeter, they're going to show up the same. But when you stack 30 or 40 or 50s in a circuit, the little tiny differences start to add up, and cheap capacitors can be quite microphonic. You can tap them and you get a bit of resonance. And you might not hear that in a pedal on the floor, but that slight resonance causes harmonics throughout it and subtle differences. And this is why studio guys with studio gear pay a lot of money for their capacitors and a lot of money for specific things, because they know that the differences stack up, and over time, if you've got lots of pedals in your circuit, it all adds up, and you get this really interesting thing that happens where if you take everything out of circuit, like people do when they're testing it, and say, I compared this original to this clone and they were the same, you're not testing them in situ, so of course you can't hear the difference. But when they're in chain with loads of others and you're in a mix with a band and you're playing, somehow you get this sort of feeling and you go, somehow it's just better when I use that pedal. Somehow everything's a bit more alive, and that's one of the differences of premium parts. Classic examples of this, of course, are your famous and favourite musicians who often have their special legendary gear they don't want to let go of. They're not engineers, they have no idea why it's doing it, but they have looked out and found a piece of equipment with all the good parts in it that are all just the right values in the right places, and they're not going to let that go, because they know that a clone of that, or a different version of that, or a modern version where they've had to change supplier for parts and use slightly cheaper parts, which is happening a lot right now, even in premium pedals, saying, well, customers won't pay more, so we'll have to use something slightly cheaper and not tell them. They know that if they get that, it'll just lack that something, that je ne sais quoi. So, yeah, variability in cheap pedals using leftovers. The idea of this, that tone stacks up and there's a sense of it. And then the third one, I think I got four of these. Third one is lifespan. How long is your pedal really going to last? You know, we don't think about it, but the obvious ones, of course, we go, oh, Boss pedals are indestructible. Yeah, they've got metal chassis, and they've got a robust switch, and they've got metal shaft pots, so they last. plastic pots. Obviously, we could break them, but what you also don't think about is that all those exposed parts, like the surface of the track inside the variable resistor, is exposed to air, it oxidizes, it becomes dirty, it becomes scratchy, and different materials have different lifespans. Jack sockets are a particular culprit. You're never going to ask about what the thickness of the plating of the nickel on your socket is, are you? I mean, who's going to do that? These cliff sockets are thicker, they'll last longer. How many jack insertions before the coating wears away and becomes scratchy and no longer works properly? Is it going to get dirty and oxidized just from being sat around in the air? And these are subtle differences. You buy your cheap pedal and you put it in a cup and you pull it out, it doesn't work anymore because all the oxides have gone everywhere. It wasn't cleaned properly at the factory, they rushed it through. And so what worked perfectly on day one, 2 years down the line, goes in the bin. So we have variability from leftovers, we have the idea of tones stacking up in a mix, we have lifespan, and I think the fourth one, which kind of is my favourite, is feel. One of the really interesting things with the Grand Classic, I didn't expect this. I used Alp switches because I kept buying the cheap Chinese ones at first, for my very first pedals. And I'd find I had to sift through them and throw some in the bin. And no, I don't want to do this. This is a premium pedal. Just pay the extra. And so I bought Alps and some nice knobs for these. And I remember taking this to my friend Tate in his recording studio, and he immediately went, "Oh, those are really nice switches." And I was just taken aback. That was his first thing, his very first impression. And since then, I've had a lot of people always go, "Oh, it's really nice switches." And I think that's really interesting. And it's the same with the knobs, the rotating knob. There's a really nice feel to them. And you wouldn't think that matters so much, but it turns out it really does. I've made some of these with different knobs on, and people will honestly think they're a different pedal. They'll say to me, that one's tonally different to that one because of the control knob. I think I first encountered this personally with the Boss Metal Zone. It has those tiny little EQ knobs, and I found I could not dial in with any precision the EQ I wanted because it's like tiniest move is like quite a leap. And I ended up dismissing that pedal for ages until I actually got, paradoxically, a sort of a clone of it with full-size knobs. And I was like, oh, it works if you can get your hand on the knob. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing because if you're engaging with your pedals controls and you have got smooth control and a good feel, then you're going to be more creatively inspired. Now that's a really important thing because we're artists, I'm an artist, you're an artist, we're making art. If you're having to fight your pedal with its tiny little control knobs and a clunky foot switch, and all the other things, it's going to frustrate you, and that frustration is going to come through into your music. It's going to show up to your fans. It's going to make you not play very well, and that's far more important than any of the things I've just described. So I was a sound engineer for a while before all this. I thought it was a good idea. I hated it actually. I did it for about a year and I went, no. And during that time, one of the things I learned quite quickly is the sound on stage is far more important than the front of house. If your musicians on stage are loving themselves, they're playing their guitars and their drums, they can hear each other, and that sound is like, oh, really good. They just play really great and they sing really powerfully and they engage with the audience. Whereas the front of the house sound, yes, it could be a bit bassy, a bit trebly, a bit too loud, a bit too quiet, and the audience won't like that. But moreover, what the audience really don't like is a band looking confused on stage, wandering around going, oh, what's that going on? And then having to go, can we turn up the guitars a bit, please? Can we turn on I can't hear this. And they're going, oh. That's a terrible show for all of us. And as soon as I explain it to you, it makes sense, doesn't it? I know you're just connecting going, yeah, of course, the band needs to hear himself. If you watch any really cool artists, they'll have their own little world on stage. I was always I like there's a Nile Rodgers thing. Nile Rodgers has 2 Fender amps by the drum kit pointed up at him, and he can wander over anytime he likes, just stand in front of them and play in front of his amps. And that's his world. And in being happy there, I believe is an important why of why his gigs are so amazing, because he's got his own world, and how the sound hits you at the front is protected to you it's important, but it's not as important as that. And it's the same with these. How you interact with your equipment, how you feel about it, is more important than whether it's a clone, not a clone, whether you paid money, part quality. So those are some of the key differences in a technical sense for me. Leftover parts for variability, the stack up of tone in a mix, the subtle variations that you can't hear in an A/B but add up, the lifespan overall of it, because you just don't want that. And again, that feeds into the overall feel of things like quality. And there's one other aspect which you might not see of quality parts. Well, you're not going to see it, which is maker pride. So when we make our pedals, me and my 2 employees, I'm pleased to have 2 now, we know we're making something good, and so we put that extra effort in. And this is a known thing. This is a thing in industry. In industry, we say, why use better parts? Because mostly you guys don't care. You just want the bottom price. And statistically, across the world, every time, same thing. You always just go for the cheaper item. That's what happens on average. But it turns out that using premium parts makes us feel good as makers, which makes us put more effort in, which makes a better product, which gives us a better image, which makes everything better, and everyone likes, everyone benefits. So we also use really high quality parts because we want to be proud of what we make. And that pride feeds into all the different processes, and it feeds into making a great pedal that then you hopefully engage with, which makes you feel great and makes you feel inspired and makes you feel proud. And that's another important thing. Pride. Pride matters so much as a musician. You're going to go out there and expose yourself to the world, not literally, I hope, and put yourself up for judgment. That's a really daring, courageous, scary thing to do, is to put your music out there, your art, your creativity, and say, judge me, find me wanting, or raise me up. I'm in your hands. And to succeed at that, you need to know in your heart of hearts, well, you either need to be a sociopath, or hopefully not that, and know in your heart of hearts that you've done something you're proud of, and you're proud of it. You want to be able to be admired, and to be admired, you first have to admire what you've done. You want to feel important, and make that connection. And again, you have to have pride. And we are social creatures. We care what our peers think. We care about our peers' opinions. It matters to us. So all of this feeds in. And again, I think you have to ask yourself, what is the true price here? And what am I buying into? But as I said, I don't want to sound preachy. I'm sort of highlighting things you may not have thought about the subtle differences in tonal quality and the way a good piece of equipment will lift you up. So okay, let's take a step back to technology now before that goes there. Another thing I come across on the internet a lot is claims that all pedals are just the same. Oh, I hate that dismissive thing. That's like saying all shoes are the same because they go on your feet. All jumpers are the same because they keep you warm. No, they're not. Don't be stupid. Don't be ridiculous. It's the most reductive, dumbass thing I see again and again. Oh, it's got a diode clipper. It's just another diode clipper. Oh, there's 1,000 things around a diode clipper that make it different. So, like science. So if we were doing scientific research for academia or for a big company to make the world a better place, the first thing we'd do is we're going to read all the literature and do a little literature review. We're going to develop what we would call an understanding of the state of the art, so we know where everything's up to. Why would it be different with pedals? Of course, we're going to go out and look at everyone else's pedals. We're going to see what they've done, and then in science, we'd say, well, how do we advance this a step forward? And again, of course, we're going to look at a Tube Scream or a DS1 or whatever, and say, what did they do? We're going to find the thing that inspired us and say, how can we make it even better? So yes, it's going to have a diode clipper in it, but no, it's not determined by the fact it has a simple similar circuit. Now, this said, I'm not going to talk about the bad actors within the pedal design world. There are some, of course, who will just outright take someone else's circuit and either get a clone PCB or cover it in goop and just claim it's their own. Bit naughty. Please don't do it. But I mean, that is not what this is about. So I'm just going to ignore that. The main thing for me, when we're all being good people, is I think it ceases to be a clone when we put the time in. It's very artistic again. It's quite ambiguous. It's vague. If you've sat down, taken a circuit you care about, tried to understand it, and made changes to it to try and improve it, I think that's a fair thing to say it's no longer a clone. It's an evolution of a great idea. It's based on a great idea. And we're there to evolve these ideas, and there should be no shame in declaring an origin inspiration. I absolutely believe we should be more honest about that and say, yes, it has been inspired by. My Grand Classic is inspired by Andrew Barter's Sansamp GT2. I'm a little bit inspired by myself. I think his theories on creativity, about not getting stuck into ways of doing things, about exploring all the options, even if everyone says it's a bad idea, explore it for yourself. And that's one of the things I read, paraphrasing, they said. And so I began playing that GT2 in my band for many years, which is actually on the shelf behind me there. You might be able to spot it there. And I loved that pedal, brilliant tone. You know what I hated? I hated the EQ. Sorry, Andrew, your EQ sucks. It's like a little hi-fi EQ. Low is too low, high is too harsh, unusable, leave it in the middle. I hated the fact that it was only really for recording, so it rolls off the treble. And I started out with this thinking, I wonder if I could get a similar sort of crunch tone, but like add versatility. And that's my baseline. This is nothing like his pedal. Yes, I did look at his schematic. Yes, I have dissected it. I mean, I can't clone it anyway because he doesn't really use proper circuits and he uses this amazing wafer technology, but we'll not get into that. But it's not the same in any way. It's an evolution and it wouldn't exist without having someone come before me. So in my case, I really liked his Californian British switch. I thought, could I do some kind of variable thing to sweat between the two? And it turned out I can't, because the way he's done the design, I couldn't. So I came up with my own circuit, which I've called the gyro tilt. And I'm just going to make that circuit available to everyone because I think, I'll come back to that about innovation, but I think everyone should have it. And the gyro tilt sweeps between two extremes to make a sort of fat sound and a honky sound to EL34, EL84, and it changes the harmonic structure. I'm really, really, really proud of that control. My EQ is an active EQ with really custom filter. I'm proud of that as well. And all of these things, and then the soft switch, is another one. And that's an interesting one, the soft switch. That was an idea I came with off the top of my head. This is an example of why we don't do things off the top of the head. And I was working through it, and then I started afterwards looking at other people's designs, and I came across a design, actually Behringer's, I think it was, of one of their amplifiers, and I was like, wow, that's so similar to mine. Pure coincidence. And if I'd have actually done the research first, I might have found their design and saved myself some time and been able to evolve it instead of creating my own design with its own flaws. And curiously enough, I made this wrong in all these pedals, and I actually have to drill out a piece of the circuit board at the back of every single one every time I make one until the next batch. And I could have avoided all that by evolving from someone else's. So I think, waffling a bit too far there. The main distinction is, if you just take someone else's design and rip it off and put it in a box, I think that's a bit of a dick move. But I kind of get why, because creating your own design is an incredible amount of work, because a lot of it just takes a huge amount of time and a huge amount of money. And I think really this is the distinction. There's a big grey area between it being a clone and being original. Pretty much all original designs are evolutions. The thing I'd like, I think the distinction is, you have to say, do I like that company's ethos, or the figurehead's ethos, if you prefer. That may be more troublesome in some cases. But do I like the ethos of what they're doing, and do I want to support that kind of creativity? Because when you buy into a boutique pedal, you're buying into research for the next pedal. I mean, I don't know if you've thought of that. But we are always looking forward. So I've got 2 or 3 more pedals in the thing. And when you buy these, that money doesn't just pay my wages and help grow the company. Some of that goes into buying new parts and new circuit boards to try out new ideas. So you're funding innovation. When you buy a boutique pedal, you 100% are funding innovation. And some of those bad actors I've mentioned before about doing naughty things, they've gone on through you buying their naughty products where they've cloned stuff to actually make good products that are innovative. So that's a really good example. You still funded innovation even in that situation. Feel good about yourselves. Whereas when you buy into a true clone, you're really buying into a dead end ecosystem because they don't do any R&D. And I think that's another distinction is, there. Now, one final, as I'm starting getting to the end of this, one of the other things I want to talk about a little bit is the copyright of this. So why are we just cloning each other like furious crazy? Well, it turns out copyright on circuits is lousy. We don't really have any, and I'm really glad about that because that's one of the things that creates this incredibly innovative, rich environment. If we make a couple of changes to a circuit, then that's original as far as we're concerned. Whereas you compare that to a strict copyright environment, let's say like George Lucas, you would not dare, I would not dare put like something that even looked like a Millennium Falcon on my pedals because I would just get my ass sued handed to me and I'd be shut down within weeks. And you know it, I know it. And that's because they have, I believe, far too strict. They've gone too far, and you end up with this really interesting thing when you go too far with protectionism, where you can't be creative and everyone's getting locked off and it's held in the hands of a select few. Whereas in a low sort of copyright environment like this, we end up with a huge diversity because everyone's reading into everyone's schematics and trying to be original because they choose to, although the trade-off is, again, cheap clones. So I think that's important. So it's important we have this ecosystem of cheap clones and sort of clones and true innovation because it all feeds into each other, and it's one of those things. You either have a closed system with limited innovation or you have an open system with a lot of cloning. Now, I've talked all about this and you can hear sort of a bit negative about the clone thing, and you'll see on myself here some Behringer and other things and maybe some DIY things, and you're thinking, hypocrite. No, I don't think it's necessarily bad to buy a clone. I think you just got to understand what you're doing and be honest about it. Okay, it's okay to buy cheap. You might be supporting a cheap innovator who's just making them in his bedroom. That's super cool. But even if you're just buying a cheap plastic pedal, my first pedals were cheap plastic pedals. I couldn't afford a boutique one, and not only that, I wouldn't have known what I was buying anyway. I don't think there's anything wrong in that. It's good to have entry points. It's good to have that, and some people just don't want those things. That's fine. I think I always say is that if you come to me, I don't get it very often. Most times come to me and say, why would I choose your 150, 200 quid pedal over this £19 one from China? And I've got no answer for it because I'm like, honestly, if you're making that comparison, just go buy the cheap one. That's obviously what you want to do, and you just want me to try it. You want to validate your choice. You don't need to validate your choice. Buy what makes you happy. Just buy into the ecosystem that works for you. Sometimes a cheap pedal is just a pedal. It's okay to buy cheap, but equally, when you buy into boutique, a lot of your money is going towards innovation. You're paying for us to create something new that hasn't yet been created. That's one of the reasons it's expensive, apart from the fact it's small scale manufacture and all your massive overheads of producing where we're accountable. Because obviously, again, I'm not going to get on with it, but the Far East pedals are not accountable for how they dispose of their chemicals and waste, and they're all built with coal-fired power, yada 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 yada. So they're cheap because they use leftover parts and whatever. So ignoring the moralistic BS of that, the main thing is you're contributing to growth. You're contributing to trying to make something new, and for us, we really love that because you're contributing to let us contribute back by sharing our art and our innovation, hopefully with you, and hopefully our creations will then inspire you to create, and the whole thing becomes a big cycle of everyone creating stuff, and we get a really rich, beautiful environment with amazing albums and amazing music and wonderful innovators, all because we're all funding each other to do cool stuff. And really, that's it. And I think Rogue is down here. Oh, here she is. She's come to say hi. There's a tail. Say hi, Rogue. And she's telling me that I need to shut up now and stroke her and give her some food. So say hi, Rogue. Rogue says hi. Rogue loves you all. And Rogue says, buy Audiostorm pedals. You'll buy cat food for me if you do. And then I can have extra dreamies and the really nice posh cat food. And he'll turn the heating on and then I'll be extra warm. So yeah, you're supporting innovation and the stroking of Rogue. Bye bye everybody.